Hello, my name is Charles Lincoln, and this stream started a little bit sooner than I was expecting. But so you didn't get to hear the Wagnerian overture to Die Meistersinger von Nuremberg. But I'm back online. What can I tell you? It's been 16 months or so since I was last here, and I have been searching for a new direction. And the direction that I've chosen is to discuss about the collapse of the legal system, which has been the central feature of my life for the past, 36 years since 1987. Before that, I was in archaeology, and ever since then, I've been pursuing a strange thing called justice and truth. Sometimes I think of the old introduction to Superman of Truth, Justice, and the American Way. It's a rather vain thought. But tonight, as I said, we started a little bit earlier than I was expecting, but I'm expecting Bill Johnson and William Todd Overcash to join me from Los Angeles and Ocala, Florida. They connect on both ends of I-10, and I'm in the middle here in New Orleans. But I'm inspired to start today by several reasons. One is the Trump indictments. The third of the Trump indictments came down a week ago today, on Tuesday, August the 1st. Another, the second Trump indictment, that was the third. The second Trump indictment came down exactly 2 months ago, which is June 6th, and now we're August 6th, June 8th rather, and now we're August 8th. And the very first one came 126 days ago on April 4th in New York. So we've got 3 indictments of a former president of the United States. And I think that without any doubt, whether you love Trump or hate Trump, whether you love America or hate America, what's happening right now is a new definition. It's a brand new definition of the American way of life. And I used to live in Palm Beach some 30 odd years ago when Donald Trump and Marla Maples were there. And I actually had several run-ins with Donald Trump. I wouldn't say I knew him well, but we recognized each other at Testa's and Charlie's Crab and a couple of other restaurants around town, because I was working for a United States District Judge at 301 Clematis Street downtown, which is where two of Donald Trump's cases are now, have been before the same judge, where the second indictment, the one started June 8th, is pending, and where his civil suit last year, which was kind of a prelude to this case, was also pending. Now, I was working for a judge named Kenneth L. Ricecamp, and Kenneth L. Ricecamp was, without any doubt, a man of sterling integrity. Nobody ever outshone Kenneth Ricecamp in honor and integrity. He's passed away right now. I'm very sorry that I can't ask him what he thinks of this current indictment and this terrible, terrible situation in the what I would call a crisis of separation of powers, because the current executive branch under Merrick Garland, Biden, his Attorney General Merrick Garland, is prosecuting an earlier office of the executive branch through the judiciary. So 2 of our key elements of the constitutional government are effectively at war with each other or at war with themselves. One reason I've got Todd Overcash coming in from Florida is that Todd has been telling me for the past 10 years that he expects the current status quo to result in civil war. He's been expecting this for a long time. He thinks it could actually, I'll let him talk about it, but he's been telling me that he thinks the Civil War will break out on sometime before the election. I don't know, but I want to talk about a few while I'm waiting for Todd and Bill. I want to talk about a few earlier major crises. One in my lifetime that I particularly remember well because I was a kid, becoming a teenager, becoming politically aware, when Richard Milhous Nixon was accused of various offenses in connection with Watergate, and his own party turned against him. Even Barry Goldwater, staunchest of all solid Republicans, told Nixon that he needed to resign. And for better or for worse, at that point in history, Trump's fate is something that Richard Nixon avoided. Trump has now been Bill Johnson is joining us. Bill? Bill? You're here, but I cannot see you. Johnson, come in from Pasadena. Can't hear you, can't see. I can see that you're at least spiritually present. Bill? I cannot hear you at all. Your camera is definitely not on. Well, we knew that there were going to be some glitches the first time around. We knew it. No question about it. Let's see. We got Paul from the UK heading. Any idea how to help Bill? Bill, you can call me. It'll create a. I don't know. I mean, actually, it won't do any good to call me because I don't know what to tell you. Paul, could you call Bill on the telephone? That help? Bill, are you coming in? I'm sorry, folks. This is our maiden voyage, and maiden voyages are, you know, the Titanic. That everybody knows the Titanic's maiden voyage sank, and Bill is gone. Inauspicious beginning. He connected. Bill is back. Oh, dannazione. Dannazione. we're having trouble, folks. And I don't know whether to keep on talking because that's sort of rude to Bill. I've got to make Bill a part of this. And Bill, of course, is slightly older than I am, so he probably remembers Watergate even better than I do, and we should have him present here. Paul is telling me in chat that Bill, it must have something to do with your internet connection. He can be on the phone. I'll send you his phone number. Just called him a few seconds ago. Bill, you're a ghost on the screen.
I'm sorry. I don't know what to do.
Are you on a phone right now, or are you on your computer?
I'm on the computer both, but I'm on the phone to talk to you. The computer doesn't come through. Let me try to mute the computer so you'll just hear me on the phone. Okay. Now can you hear me now without that?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Because I haven't heard you at all on the TV screen yet.
Okay, I don't know what to do. I can't get on. It says that I'm signed up, but there's nothing to engage the screen or the video or the monitor. I don't know.
What do you mean there's nothing to engage? I mean,
it looks like everything is on, but I've unmuted. I've got the cam. It says unmute, stop cam. Everything is seems to be working, but it just doesn't come on. I don't know what's going on.
Well, unfortunately, that makes two of us.
If you would like,
you were showing on the screen is muted. That's what Paul is our tech advisor from United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, and he says you should unmute yourself and see what happens.
Okay, I just muted so you could not have the echo, but I'm unmuted now. Now I'm unmuted.
Yeah, and there's no echo because nothing's coming through is the problem. That is the problem, is that nothing's coming through on your computer screen. You now show as unmuted, but you were unmuted before.
I can go try a different computer.
If you got one, why not? I mean, go ahead. I'm on an iMac. He's gone. Oh, well, sorry about that, folks. Isn't this a professional beginning? I tell you. Anyhow, first we start 8 minutes early, and then everyone misses Die Meistersinger von Nuremberg. Okay, he'll call back in a minute. We'll see what happens. But okay, let me go back to talking for a minute about what my vision for this show is, if anyone still cares. We have a crisis, a true constitutional crisis right now, in the form of the indictments against President Bush. That would be a real crisis. President Trump. Strike that President Bush business. Oh, here.
Does it work now?
Yes, it does. Welcome.
Okay, I know what the problem was. Okay. I was on my office computer on Firefox, and Firefox must not work. So I went to my home computer, and I'm on whatever, Google or whatever it is, Chrome, and now it works. So I can't use Firefox in the future. Okay, I'm ready to go.
Happy to see you, Bill. Thank you for coming in. It's great to be in touch with you right now. And I'll repeat some of the stuff I said before, and we may have to edit this, but I was saying that 1 week ago today, the third indictment against Donald J. Trump came in from the District of Columbia. 2 months ago today, the second indictment came down in the southern District of Florida at the courthouse where I used to work as a law clerk. 30 years ago, but nonetheless. And then 125, 126 days ago, we got the very first indictment, which to my mind is the very strangest of all, which is up in New York, in the county of New York. And anyhow, I was saying that I think that we're embarked on a very interesting constitutional crisis, and that's what really inspired me to want to start podcasting again. Obviously, I haven't been on this screen for 16 months, and I've just been very confused about what to go. But I think we've got an amazing crisis right now, and I was about to compare it to Nixon and Watergate, and you're slightly my senior. Luckily for you, not too much, but you were probably in your 20s during Watergate. I was just barely entering my teens, and I'd like you to comment on what you think is going on with these three indictments, soon to be a fourth. I have this feeling that the reason Sam Dixon couldn't join us tonight is because he's waiting with bated breath for the fourth indictment to come down in his own backyard in Atlanta. And four indictments against a former president are going to be amazing. This is arguably one of the greatest constitutional crises in the history of the Republic, and nobody is treating it that way. I mean, the left is just, Trump is an crick. He's an evil man, and he deserves everything he's get. And everybody in on the right is just sitting here saying nothing. What do you think?
Well, first of all, let me go back to what you first started about. When Richard Nixon resigned as president, I was in Japan as a missionary for my church, and we all gathered around the radio to hear his resignation speech. And every time he'd say a word, then they'd translate it in Japanese, so we couldn't listen to what he was saying very well. We had to listen around what they were talking about. But I felt guilty not knowing what Watergate was all about. And because I didn't, I heard about it all through my high school years and early college years, and I just really didn't follow it so closely. And then it became history. And then recently, I read a few comments saying that what Nixon had done and his involvement was so much more minor than some of the things that had taken place with other people in position of power, that it really showed how the abuse of the left, the abuse of the deep state left-wing Democratic establishment really was sharpening its tools back then when they were going after him, and it's just continued ever since that time. And I kind of think that's true. Now, then you've asked me if I think that it's a constitutional crisis. Well, what I've heard a lot of people on the left say is that, the most dangerous people in the world are white males. And if Donald Trump becomes president again, it's going to be the end of democracy. And I thought about that, and it says, the only way we can stop our slouching towards Gomorrah, the disillusion of this country through attrition, is if the white man wakes up, if Donald Trump gets elected again, and if he starts to clean house. So maybe they are right. Maybe the white male is the most dangerous person in America right now to stop what's going on now. Of course, they think democracy is great, and they like much of what's going on where we don't. So maybe they are correct that we are indeed the biggest threat to their version of democracy. I don't know, but you asked me a question. I don't want to just ramble on about what do I think about these indictments. I think that there are so many laws in this country right now that no matter who you want to go after, you can find something to get criminal charges against. I think even probably the purest president we've had in recent years, Jimmy Carter, because he was a pastor and he always tried to do what's right. You'd probably find some things in his life that they could challenge him and make criminal charges out of. But someone who is as flawed as Donald Trump, you don't have to look that far to find criminal charges to level against him. But would they level against anybody else other than Trump? No. I do believe that they are targeting Donald Trump because he is really the only person on the national stage that can disrupt the flow of things as the left wing and as the Democrats, as the anti-white establishment is trying to accomplish. And so that's what makes Donald Trump so dangerous.
Well, I mean, I think that another aspect of the danger actually is that, in fact, if this goes forward, if they continue prosecuting him as they appear to be doing, it's the beginning of a complete mixture of the the separation of powers, because basically the president will serve only at the sufferance of the judiciary. That's what I mean by the constitutional crisis, is that if you can question a former president about, I mean, I've been reading these indictments and I'm extremely confused about the New York indictment. I really do not comprehend exactly what they're charging him with in that. I mean, I know what the news media says. They're saying it's a cover up, but in terms of understanding the relationship between the law and the facts in the state of New York, it's very opaque. And the indictment, I love the vagueness of the indictment that under New York statute 175, they're charging Donald Trump of committing a crime in order to assist in the commission of another crime. That's literally what the indictment says. And it doesn't say what the other crime is.
I read that also, and I thought it was quite vague, but I thought that was the one that they could most easily go after Trump for, because what it is wasn't he spending money and characterized it as something different? Wasn't it? Isn't this related to the bribery scandal for one of his mistresses, and to pay off, and then isn't it related to like a misrepresentation for taxes or things like that?
Stormy Daniel, and yet, well, okay, but the New York indictment is not actually about taxes. It's just false statements. False statements to assist in the commission of another crime. And basically, they say that. I mean, do you understand why all these? I mean, they make reference in the New York indictment to specific documents. That there's an invoice that says this, and there's an invoice, and there's a check, invoice, check, and receipt. You know, basically, there's very specific documents that every business has, and it doesn't quite say what's false about them. And
I thought it was tax related, but maybe I'm wrong. I thought it was mischaracterization of reimbursement. I thought maybe he could not legitimately deduct from his taxes the bribery payments to this mistress, and they're going after that. They couldn't use the federal statutes because they're just a local, New York district attorney that's doing it. So they cobbled together this statute because they're not the IRS, they're not the federal government, so they can't charge them that. But I thought that was what the misrepresentation, or the commission of the furtherance of the crime was, to misrepresent their taxes. I thought that's what it was all about, but I don't know.
Okay, just give me some legal analysis here. If you lie on your federal taxes, is that automatically a fraud under state law?
Yeah, that is the question, and I think normally it would not be, and they're trying to cobble together this state charge, but they can't do it under the IRS regulations because that's not their purview. That's not their area of discipline that they
Okay, but if that were obviously the purpose of the state indictment, why didn't the DC prosecutor, for instance, or the Florida prosecutor, why didn't they just piggyback on the New York charges and charge him in federal law with tax evasion or tax fraud or whatever it would be?
Well, I think this underscores the fact that it is political persecution, and you have, like you say, the courts, the district attorneys, the general attorney generals. They have the ability to file charges against an individual, and maybe the ones at the federal court level didn't want to participate in these shenanigans.
Shenanigans is basically the word that I would use to describe this. It is, if it were not the office of president and the dignity of the courts at stake here, this would make an amazing comedy. It's just that the stakes are so high, but it seems like a little bit of a Keystone Cop stage to me.
Well, okay, I think that this could play out in two different ways. First of all, Trump could weather the storm, get elected president, and then you do not have a more vindictive, tight-fisted president that can just, ham-handedly swing and go after all of his enemies. You don't have another person in the nation that has his emotional state to do that, and that's why we need to have him president, because nobody else, not a Pence, not a DeSantis, no one will come out swinging as hard and go like a bull in a china shop just to wreck everything. So if he gets elected president, then you will really have a constitutional crisis as designated by the left. All of their fears will come true. At least he's going to try to do that. And you say that you're going to result in the judiciary running the country. That will happen if Trump does not get elected. But if Trump does get elected, the opposite is going to happen. He's going to say, well, Marbury v. Madison is just bootstrapped by the judiciary to give them the right to review what's constitutional. There's nothing in the Constitution that gives them the right to make the final decision. I'm going to set up my own commission to decide what's constitutional, and everything I'm going to do, I'm going to pass it by them and not the courts. And if we decide it's constitutional, we're going to do it. If we decide to put half of the CIA and the FBI in prison and decide to send them not to Guantanamo Bay, but to make a deal with Haiti to have them housed in the Haitian prisons where it's so overcrowded that whenever someone wants to turn over, they have to have all the whole road turn over because it's so crowded. If we decide we want to keep them there until it's decided and we determine that's constitutional, the courts have no say about it. So I think if Trump gets reelected, you're going to have a severe reduction in the power of the judiciary. And if Trump gets indicted, gets convicted, and does not get reelected, then I agree with you. The constitutional crisis will lean heavily on the powers to the judiciary.
I guess I'm thinking that what you're describing, if he wins, is still a radical transformation of the landscape. And I just want to go through a little bit more history at this point. uh, you know, the in 2016, and not no 2020 rather, in 2020 we had this election, and as you know, I think I think I was I think anyhow I was involved in the Texas v the Texas versus Pennsylvania case, where the state of Texas filed an original action, or attempted to file an original action in the Supreme Court, uh, questioning the election and demanding that the Supreme Court evaluate the validity of the election. And the Supreme Court wouldn't touch it. And I thought that was a major mistake and a major constitutional failure on the part of the Supreme Court. I was involved in an amicus brief on behalf of some congressmen and senators who were in support of the state of Texas. And I'm just thinking that, I mean, looking back, I when the Supreme Court refused to hear Texas's original action, and then January 6th happened, and I remember thinking to myself, and really praying about it. To be honest, I was praying. I don't know how you said you were actually up in Washington for January 6th, right?
Yep, I was there. I got tear gassed.
Well, I was safe here in New Orleans, but I was thinking to myself, this is an 18 Brumaire moment. This is the crisis that Donald Trump could use to terminate the Constitution of the United States, and to use special emergency powers to basically suspend the election of 2020, and refuse to allow Biden to be seated, which I actually think would have been moral and just. But for whatever reason, he chose not to do that. And I would love to be able to, go back to where I was 30 years ago, able to just walk in and talk to him, and as a neighbor in Palm Beach about this, because I would love to know why he chose not to use emergency powers to suspend a clearly fraudulent election.
Well,
but he didn't, and the point is, now we're at the same point. We're kind of at the same point. These prosecutions of, I mean, you were making kind of an Ayn Randian point a few minutes ago, but we have so many laws now. I believe there's a book out there called 3 Felonies a Day. Have you ever heard of that?
No, but I like the title.
3 Felonies a Day is a book that basically takes the proposition that there are so many laws that you and I, as peace-loving and as law-abiding as we think we are, we probably could be indicted for 3 felonies a day.
Okay, probably I would be involved in four a day. But okay, I think that the reason
Show off.
I think that Trump, he didn't really know the landscape. He didn't know what was going to unfold. He thought that was Vice President Pence's responsibility under the Constitution to not certify and send it and make everything go to the House of Representatives. And that, I think, is what should have been done. But Vice President Pence and everybody, almost to a man, except for Donald Trump, is more or less part of the establishment. Donald Trump and even most of his advisors, even the most extreme advisors, were still too timid, too part of the establishment to take the approach that you recommend that he takes. I don't think he's going to have that mistake next time around. And so, yes, I do believe that many people on the left, many people in the center, and many people on the right will consider Donald Trump to take constitutional uh, will kind of take the country in an extreme direction that we haven't seen in a long time, and really it'll result in a constitutional crisis. Many people will think that has happened, but that is what this country needs. We have gone downhill for the last 50 years, and we need to go in a different direction. And Donald Trump is the only one that can do that. And the good thing is that they're coming down so hard on Donald Trump, and his supporters are digging in their heels so much. He has so much control over the Republican Party, and there's going to be so much scrutiny at the general election after Donald Trump inevitably is the Republican candidate, that I think that there's a very strong possibility that he will defeat Mr. Kennedy, who's going to be the Democratic candidate and won't be Biden. And I think Donald Trump will be elected, and it depends on who his vice president is, and it depends on who his cabinet is, how much house he will clean.
Well, you mentioned his vice president, and I have to say I'm a little bit worried about that, because a few minutes ago when you first started talking, you were talking about how Trump, to you, to me, to a lot of people, he symbolizes the possibility of restoring white America, white man's America. But there's this tremendous pressure that I see in the Republican Party for him to appoint Vivek Ramaswamy. Uh, yes, I see your eyes. My thoughts exactly. Will he? I mean, what if he appoints Vivek Ramaswamy as his vice president? And I mean, I don't know if it would be worse to have, uh, you know, Vivek Ramaswamy, or, you know, many years ago. Many years ago, Bill Buckley suggested that Israel should be admitted as the 51st state. And if it were, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu could be his running mate. And I wonder if it would be worse to have Vivek Ramaswamy or Benjamin Netanyahu as vice president under Trump.
Well, I think the general rule of thumb is that you should vote your own race. And so I had to compromise my principles there when I voted for Patrick Buchanan when he picked as his vice presidential candidate a black woman. And I voted for Patrick Buchanan in spite of my conviction that all people should vote for their own race. And this goes even down to the fact that if you have someone like Governor Newsom of California going up against Larry Elder, a talk show host who's black in California, I think you have to vote your race, even though Newsom takes a position that I don't like, and Larry Elder takes positions that I do like. I believe that you need to vote your own race, and a vice president who is Indian, you should not vote for them. But I think that I would have to compromise my principles again and vote for him. I just hope Donald Trump would not do that. I would hope that he would pick someone like Rand Paul to be his running mate.
Well, I mean, Rand Paul is, of course, from Kentucky, which is just south of Indiana, which is where Pence was from. And Pence was a very, very solid white candidate. And I mean, everybody thought that was a weakness. And it turned out to be not just a weakness, but the end of Trump.
Right. But the difference between Pence and Rand Paul is Rand Paul is the son of Ron Paul. And so that is all you need to know. He would be, he's part of the establishment, but he's really marginal. And I think that he would provide balance to Donald Trump and would go along with Trump's extremeness to a certain extent. So I would like to see that ticket. I would like to see Rand Paul and Donald Trump, but I certainly wouldn't like to see that guy with the long name that I can't pronounce.
Ramaswamy.
Okay.
Ramaswamy. I have noticed that all over the country, Indians are taking over. I don't know if you've noticed that, but in the legal profession in particular, uh, Chicago and Los Angeles, two cases that don't involve Donald Trump that I'm peripherally involved in. Both have AUSAs who are Indian subcontinent, and I just wonder what's happening here. Why is this going on?
This underscores the fact that we have been remiss in rearing our children properly. When I was going up through high school, very few of my classmates were as serious a student as they should have been. Of course, I went to a high school where everybody was white. And so they just wanted to uh, do silly things and not concentrate on their studies like they should. And the immigrants that come in from other countries, whether it's the subcontinent, whether it's the Far East, or wherever, even if they come in from a country that has a traditionally low IQ, if they study very hard and take things seriously, they can succeed. Whereas our children are caught up in drugs and alcohol and immoral behavior. So I believe that the white race has great potential, but you have to couple good genes with good upbringing and hard work. And the parents and of the baby boomers generation have been remiss in not instilling the hard work and making their kids be the best citizens that they can be. Whereas some of these immigrants have, maybe they don't have the same gray cells that the white race has innately, but they have a better ethic growing up than we have. So we have to change and promote our children to do likewise. But yes, I do agree with you that in medicine, in all sorts, in politics, in law, members from the subcontinent are exceeding and displacing our white youth.
Todd Overcash just joined us. You two have met before. Do you remember meeting before?
Long time ago.
Okay, I'll accept that.
It was in when you used to have those big groups. It'd be like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of you.
Oh, okay, sure. And okay,
You,
well, good to see
you all didn't meet in one of those, did you?
I thought so.
Well, anyhow, Todd, have you been remiss in raising your children?
Who, me?
Yes, and Bill Johnson is saying that baby boomers like you and me and him too, by the way, have been remiss in raising our children. My son,
I think it started well before then. I think it started well before us.
well, I mean, what are your thoughts on? I mean, how long were you there? I just saw you. How long had you been waiting?
Oh, I just got on.
Oh, you just got it. Okay, good.
Yeah, I think it started well before then. I mean, the reality is, my view is that what's been done was intentional. With the movement I may be off on my dates, so don't get mad at me. With the movement to make divorce quick and easy, was to divide families, to get fathers disengaged in children's lives. The mother would become the dominant influence and dominate the school system. And we have raised children. Well, we work so hard, their life should be easier. And it's gotten easier and easier and easier. And there are kids today who've never worked. Why am I not seeing all of you all?
This is a recent phenomenon, because if I look at both of my parents, I mean, my parents came from both of them, both sides were cotton farmers in Arizona, and both of them had siblings. They had like 14 siblings on both sides.
Right.
And some of them grew up in the Depression and or even before the Depression, and every generation before them were salt of the earth farmers. As far as back being in the United States, they were farmers. And back at that time, 90% of the population were farmers. And it wasn't until my parents graduated from high school and that the society has changed so that it resulted in the issues that Todd is talking about. So my ancestors, my people were not really prepared for what the onslaught that has come about, as Todd mentioned, because we have a history of working the soil, just raising our lot of kids and teaching them to be good citizens. Like my grandfather farmed his whole life. My grandfather Johnson farmed cotton, and he only farmed with horses, even though there were wonderful tractors. But even when he was in retiring in the 1950s, he still farmed with horses. And so that was his mentality. And we were unprepared for the onslaught of what has happened to America. And we have to regroup and refocus our direction to take the full potential of what we have and take back our country.
Well, my view is that what they wanted to do was they wanted to divide the families, remove the father, who, as a rule, is not universal. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes a mother is more disciplined on a subject than a father is, and vice versa, and all that. But as a rule, a child was shown two perspectives, but the family stood together to make them better. Why am I only seeing one person?
Because I said it that way, because I'm flipping back and forth between the speaker. This is a new program that I've never used before.
Okay. Well, anyhow, and with that, what's happened is that slowly the courts have moved where they've removed fathers from children's life. That's one aspect. The second aspect that we've entitled children, and I know people in my generation who say, well, kids don't need to grow up till they're 25 or 30. Well, I think that's insane. I was mowing pastures when I was 8 years old, and I'd drive a tractor from one field to another. I understood responsibility, and we don't instill that in anyone. We don't instill family value. But I think the bigger picture is what they want us to do. Tell me how this is any different than Adolf Hitler or Mao Zedong, where you take and make the family irrelevant. You destroy the family. The children look to the state for solution. And the state is the guardian of all things. Please tell me the difference in what we see today and what occurred there.
Well, I take umbrage of your lumping Germany in with China. Everybody is attacking World War II Germany from the left and from the right, and I am sick of it.
I'm not attacking them. I'm talking about this concept.
There were good families in
Nazi
Germany.
Absolutely. There were. No doubt about it. I'm just saying, though, but if you go back and look at the video doctrines and all this, you had children who were turning their parents. You have the same thing that occurred in countries where the state becomes the dominant role model.
You're talking about the culture of informants.
Yes.
Which we definitely do have in the United States right now. There's no question. I mean, I think I've told you both the story of the former U.S. attorney here in New Orleans who came to my church. Oh, this is almost 10 years ago now, and he announced with great pride, shocking pride to my mind, he announced with great pride that he had instituted a program in the Orleans parish high schools where he was the teachers were instructing children on how to inventory all the guns in their parents' house and report those to the police, to the schools, who would then turn in those lists to the police, and the police would turn them into the federal government, because Louisiana 10 years ago had just passed one of the first constitutional carry amendments, which included this clause that said that any federal officer who attempts to subvert the right of the people of Louisiana to keep and bear arms would be subject to state prosecution. And the U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Louisiana didn't like that one bit. And he was bragging to our congregation about how the federal government was not going to take that because and they were going to use kids against their parents to do exactly what you're talking about, to act as informants. And yes, I understand what Bill is saying about, in essence, Germany did promote the family up to a point, but they did have, the Gestapo and the culture of
No,
informants.
I'm not against Hitler. In fact, if you really look at what a lot of things Hitler did, I mean, people do not realize one of the first things Hitler did was said, I want every family to have a car. He created the Volkswagen. People don't want to stop and think about what the Volkswagen was about. I mean, there's a lot of things that people don't give him credit for.
And also,
just like, okay, in medicine, when you have a fractured femur, we treat a fractured femur most times today with a femoral rod. Where did the femoral rod come from? It came from Germany during World War II. Nobody wants to talk about that.
I didn't even know that.
I didn't either. But what I'd like to say to support what Charles said is that if I were to send my young children to school the same way that I went to school, riding my Stingray bicycle or walking a few blocks when I was just in elementary school, I wouldn't have to fear the molester so much as I would have to fear the Mrs. Nosy Parker who would call social services and child protective services and have my child taken away from me because I allowed them to walk to school. So I agree with you. We've gone too far in government and neighbor interference and tattling on the way we raise our kids.
Absolutely. And people don't realize, like in Florida, okay, Marion County, where I live, the school system has over 58 psychologists on staff.
58?
Yes.
What's the population of Marion County?
No, I'm talking about just for the school system.
No.
And forget about the number. Forget about the number. People get hung up on number. Forget about the number. Only one of them is licensed in the state. The rest do not have to be licensed, but they work under his supervision. They're not required under state law to be licensed since they work for the system. They also are given immunity, sovereign immunity. Explain to me how that does not make me a submissive to the federal government.
That's why this talk regarding Trump coming back into power is so very important, because there's so much wrong with our system that I think Donald Trump, if he gets reelected, he may do some good things, he may do some bad things, but what's going to happen is change, and that's what we need.
Oh, I agree with you. I think, though, to me, I've told Charles this, I think we're heading to, if you go back around 2000, don't hold me to the date, somewhere around 2014, 15, there was an open NATO EU meeting where they discussed that Russia must be divided into three nations: the Baltics, Russia, and I forgot what the other segment was. And as I told Charles,
you were saying Siberia last night.
No. 3 nations. Siberia is separate. 3 nations. And China has always laid claim to Siberia and multiple other countries. I truly believe that Hillary Clinton was supposed to go in and they were going to complete the transition where effectively China was going to dominate the world, Russia was going to be divided, and we were going to be disarmed and whatever. And I think that Biden, prior to June of next year, he will sign the United Nations, Treaty number 2,
Small arms treaty.
Small arms treaty. It will not be ratified by the Senate because if it's ratified, it violates our Constitution. And I think there will be a call for the UN to assist in the disarmament of American people. And I think China will be the number one volunteer. I think we are heading to a major problem. Maybe I'm an oversayer, but if we don't turn this country to in the next year to 2 years, it's lost.
I think that really, I mean, again, part of the reason that I decided to start podcasting again is I want us as a group, as a movement, to be part of this dialogue of what's going to happen. And I think that the focus on the three possibly soon to be 4 indictments against President Trump is really the key crisis for us to focus on right now, because it illustrates so many problems with the so-called criminal justice system and with the psychology of the country. I mean, I cannot imagine that Joe Biden, if he were in his right mind, which reasonably sure he's not, but if he were in his right mind, how could he be sponsoring this prosecution or supporting this prosecution of Trump when he knows that he will soon be a former president himself? I mean, like I said, if we
It's
put
not
all
Biden. It's not Biden. It's the deep state. And let me tell you something, Charles. Let me tell you something. They haven't killed Trump. But if they killed Trump, it would be a massive event in this nation that would lead to something very bad. And they were worried about that. They literally want to destroy him. And I will tell you right now, I've been through at a different level, but I've been through exactly what Trump's been through. And all I can do is tell you right now, Trump's a damn strong man to be able to survive it, because I almost didn't.
Todd, as you know, I have too. And yes, I mean, when I think about my experiences in the past, 3 indictments in 4 months. I mean, April is only 4 months ago, and April 4th was the first indictment to come out. April 4th, June 8th, and August 1st. Everybody, a lot of people, we were making Hitler comparisons before. Well, Trump has another comparison to be made to Hitler. Like Hitler, he's surrounded. He is encircled. 3 going on 4 indictments is like having Russia on one side, Great Britain on the other side, and the ocean, and the United States coming in through Africa. It's exactly like that. And Trump is not a nation. I don't know exactly. I mean, I don't know exactly how rich he is, but he is spending a tremendous amount of money defending himself. It doesn't matter how much he gets from contributors. He is besieged like William Barrett Travis at the Alamo. He is besieged, and we have now, we as a country right now are setting the precedent of approving this kind of siege of a former president. And in essence, I would say that the process that began 25 years ago, when you and I were going through our crises, that was the seed of getting people used to this kind of persecution. Our experience was that we were abandoned by our colleagues. We had very few people. I had a few in Texas who stood up with me, but they were very few. And others looked at me and said, I can't help you, because if I help you, it's suicide for me.
Well, remember where I live. I live next door to the largest retirement community in the United States. The Villages of Central Florida, 250,000 people, retirees. 80% of them are retired government employees because they have massive benefits. And I stand in line at stores and I hear them talking. They're in their 70s. And they talk about, I don't have long to live. Whatever's going to happen in this country is going to happen. I can handle it. And let the next generation deal with it. And every time I hear them talk like that, I look at them in the eye and I say, thank God our founding fathers did not adopt that attitude, because our new generation is not going to stop it because you haven't taught them. And
Todd, how do you think we should start teaching them? Or Bill, both of you comment on how do we start? Because right now, young people, I think on the whole, are completely complacent about, for example, the Trump indictments. I don't see anybody. I mean, Tulane University is 5 blocks away from where I live, and I don't see any signs that the Tulane student body is going to be even interested in
then
the.
you need to read. Then you need to read the surveys that have done of the major universities that have been surveyed. 90% of the student population believes in socialism, and that socialism in the United States will be better than it was done in other countries, but we will make it better. That is the national polls.
Okay, so how do we change how do we change, Todd, Bill, how do we change the attitudes of young people? How do pardon my saying so, how do 3 old farts like us go about influencing people who are 40 years younger than we are? Because that's what we need to do. We need to wake them up and change their entire approach here.
Well, for the last 30 years, people that I associate with, and myself included, have been saying, well, I can't wait till the economy collapses because we need a collapse of the economy to wake people up and get the change that has taken place in other collapsed economies. And the economy has never collapsed. The economy just keeps going on and on and on because of fiat currency or whatever reason. And so I don't think we can rely on a collapsed economy to change things around. What I think that can happen is that we need to get an unstable person in the White House who will take unstable and mercurial actions to change the deep state. And I'm going to put my vote for the most unstable candidate I can think of, and I hope he will make the change necessary.
Bill, I mean, I hate to say it, but I think that Todd made a valid point about Trump. He is incredibly solid in his resolve and ability to face these indictments. We already have the most unstable, mentally incompetent president in world history right now.
Yeah,
we have I don't know if you have a cat, but if you have a cat in your house, it has more sense about how to run the world than the current occupant of the White House.
Right. But what I'm talking about, I'm looking at Donald Trump as the savior of this country because of his personality. And resolve is one aspect of it, and his mercurial actions and his extreme actions are another point. And I think that we need that in this country. And I'm not saying
I understood what you meant. Absolutely.
Yeah. We need someone that no one can rely on except those of us who want extreme change.
Well, I was telling Charlie earlier today that my stepson was interviewing for a new position within the Army at what used to be Fort Bragg. And they gave him a scenario where he had a standing order, well, not standing, an issued order to supply money, goods, to do Action A. Another command structure came and said, we know you have this stuff here, and we are telling you to disobey your standing order because in the better interest of things, we believe this is a bigger target. And he said, I cannot violate an order. And they told him he was not eligible for that position because he had to be prepared to face court martial and violate orders for the greater good as they perceived it. Now, our military is supposed to take an oath. So you have this occurring in the military, and you have to remember that the mass majority, and the Marine Corps colonel who they threw out of the Marine Corps, he's very right. The generals are not military people. They're military, but they're not fighters. They're PhDs and masters, and to become a general, you are a political appointment. And they buy into the socialistic government. We have a problem. There's going to be a split in the military.
So you're telling me, and this is quite surprising, that they want someone in a position of authority that will disobey orders from the higher up for the better good. And that is contrary to my understanding of how the military works. And if that's the case, it does lead to pernicious results like you are talking about.
And Danny told me, he said, Todd, I can't give you the exact details. He said, that's the gist of it. He said, they told me you don't need to come back for the final day of interview because you will not be accepted in this position. He said, Todd, I could not have accepted that position. He violates my oath. So he's still in the military. He's going a different path away from that inside group. But there is a problem.
That's mind-boggling. It's absolutely, positively mind-boggling. I mean, Todd got very frustrated with me when we were talking about this because I couldn't believe it, and I kept trying to figure out some way to rationalize it because, 13 or 14 years ago, during the Obama crisis, a prelude to where we are right now, during the constitutional eligibility crisis, I was involved with a lot of military officers who believed that they should not be taking orders from a man who was not a United States citizen. And they objected to it. And this people don't realize how many people in the United States Army understood that Barack Obama was not an American. He had nothing to do with his race, by the way. It had to do with his father and his place of birth. And he was not an American citizen. And the officers of the United States Army take an oath to uphold the Constitution. And so the idea that they are now telling people what Todd says they're telling people. I mean, this is mind-boggling. I mean, when in 1861, when another major constitutional crisis, when Albert Sidney Johnson was in command of the army of the entire western United States, including the state of California, which was still in the gold rush at that point, Albert Sidney Johnson was given, basically, he had the practical opportunity to deliver California to the Confederate States of America at a time when California had a pro-secession governor. Very few people realize that Downey, after whom a suburb of Los Angeles is named, Governor Downey, was pro-secession. He was pro-Southern. Albert Sidney Johnson had the option to deliver the state of California to the Confederacy, and he refused because of his oath, his honor. He had to resign before he could break his oath, because he had taken an oath to uphold the United States government. And the idea that, I mean, if you think about it, if the Confederacy had California gold, pardon my saying so, we would have won because we wouldn't have needed any foreign exchange from cotton at all. And we wouldn't have depended on England. We could have bought everything we wanted. So honor used to be a very important feature of the government and the culture of the military in the United States. And the idea that that is gone, That's more disturbing than almost anything, but it's directly related to the culture that would land three major indictments going on four against a former president for the purpose of preventing Donald
Well,
Trump from becoming the new, Grover Cleveland and having two terms.
let me ask you this. This is kind of, I'd like an opinion on this. You know, two things. One, I believe that we have signed the Geneva Treaty and it has been ratified. And we have an obligation under the Geneva Treaty, which, like it or not, Obama honored when he returned that child to Cuba. We have an obligation to return children to their families in these countries. That's one point. But the other point I have is when they interviewed the Homeland Security Secretary, why didn't they look at him and say, okay, you say the border is secure. Is that based on your view, or is it based on the law and the statute that exists? And I would have ran down every statute and every law and proved to him that it was his agenda. And I'd have called for immediate impeachment. And since he reports to Biden, Biden's impeachment, and John Kerry needs to be, he only reports to Biden. Why hasn't anybody ever requested the documentation of their communications for public, not necessarily public, but behind doors disclosure?
Bill, I'm going to leave that to you.
Okay, I don't know how to respond, but I'm wondering how long is this going to go?
Not long, because I'm going to take off, guys. But I'm very concerned.
I scheduled it for 2 hours. I have scheduled it for 2 hours.
I've not done anything for 2 hours. The only thing I can do for 2 hours straight is sleep.
Well,
how's California, by the way?
Oh, it's very nice, beautiful weather. I like it in many respects.
But politically and lifestyle,
we have a very good life here, and I enjoy what I do. I will stay here until I die.
Yeah, I just wish that, is it as bad as they say it is on the streets and the drugs?
No, I don't see any of it. I mean, it's very nice. You can find a lot of homeless, but not where I travel.
Right. Guys, take care. I've got to run because I've got obligations. Take care.
Okay.
It was nice to see you again.
Good night, Todd. Well, it's you and me, Bill.
Well, I think maybe in the future I'd like to kind of limit this to an hour, if that's okay, because my ADHD kicks in now.
Well, but we've only just begun, and I'm very concerned that there are so many things to talk about. So let's try to continue a little bit. I would like to know how you think Trump and the courts will play these indictments out, and what you and I, can do from the sidelines to at least help shape some marginal opinion about what's going on.
Okay, I think, as you mentioned earlier, this is an unprecedented occurrence, so we're not sure how it will play out. I just know that under typical criminal procedures, if the defendant's lawyer requests a lot more time, he's given a lot more time, because the judges don't want to have their ruling overturned on appeal. And so the right to a speedy trial is really in the hands of the defendant, because he can waive that right for a speedy trial and postpone things for a very long time. Now, I believe that there is maneuvering by the defense attorneys to get additional time to stretch it out. And the judges who are not sympathetic to the defendant in this case are reluctant to give the extension of time that he wants. And so that might mean there will be trials before the election. And I think the results might be that Trump will certainly be, I think, probably be convicted on some of these accounts before he gets elected. And normally with these type of charges, he would be let out on appeal until, I mean, he would not be incarcerated. He would be on probation or on appeal until the appeal is heard, which takes an awful long time. That'd be after the election. But that might not play out in this situation because of desire to put Trump away. And we already seen this is because they are putting a gag order or trying to put a gag order on Trump to prevent him from talking about what's going on in the trial. Now, normally, there is no gag order for a defendant. He can say whatever he wants. And the defense attorneys tells the defendant, you be quiet because everything you say is fodder for the prosecution.
Can and will be used against you, yes.
Yeah, but Donald Trump doesn't care what his lawyers say. He wants to talk. And so we see many aspects of this trial is unusual. Not only the indictments, but they're contemplating putting a gag order on him, which I think is unheard of for the defendant himself to be prevented from talking about these things. So I think what's going to happen is that there is going to be some trial before the election, and he will be convicted, and normally he would be let out on bail until the appeal is heard, and then the election will take place. He will be the nominee, and then he will be elected president, and then we'll have all sorts of interesting occurrences. But yeah, these are very interesting times, and those of you that are listening, if you're not keeping a diary, you should keep a diary, because these last the Trump era, from the Trump era of when he was elected to be the 45th president until it plays out in the next election. These are some of the most interesting times ever, and generations, if we survive generations, will want to know our take on this. So write in your diary what's going on.
Interesting suggestion. I was trying to figure out on this new program how to screen share, because the second indictment, the one that was in my old courthouse in West Palm Beach, the second indictment is 2 months old today. The federal docket sheet is now on page 41. I mean, I've never seen a criminal case like this anywhere. The one in DC will presumably be just as intense, but this one I'm as a former law clerk, I'm thinking, I wonder how the law clerks feel who got assigned to this case, and if Eileen Cannon has been allowed to hire like 6 extra law clerks or something. But I believe that in terms of the continuance, the trial in West Palm Beach has now been. I'm looking for this right now, and like I said, I'd share it if I could, but I can't figure out how to share in this program. I believe it's set for May 24th of next year, and that's a fairly normal for a case of this complexity. Well, no, there's probably never been a case of this complexity, but it's still fairly normal for a federal criminal prosecution that's being heavily contested. But all of this is just beyond comprehension. And another, in terms of white America, an issue that you and I are concerned about. I think it's interesting that in the 2 federal cases that are going on right now, Eileen Cannon and I forget what the name of the judge in the District of Columbia is, but both of the judges who are handling this case are females who are foreign born. Eileen Cannon is a conservative. She's a member of the Federalist Society, but she was born in, of all places, Cali, Colombia. There's a certain surreal sense of, a former neighbor, a girl who was born as a neighbor of Pablo Escobar, is presiding over the trial of the president of the United States, and Eva. I mean, Jared Taylor was writing about the lady in the District of Columbia who's presiding over that case. You know, we are basically almost aliens in this country, Bill.
Yeah, I think you can delete the word almost, because, yeah, we have been displaced on so many levels. But what do you think will play out? I mean, I think what's going to happen is Trump is going to be convicted on some of these cases. I think he's going to be elected president, and then there's going to be a big change possibly occurring. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I mean that's I'm going to be just exploring that in this new series, and I'm not going to make any predictions right now. I'm intrigued by your prediction that he's going to be convicted, because is there any way that states can start taking him off the ballot? For instance, his own state of Florida, if he's convicted, uh, has some of the strongest, felons cannot vote uh, statutes in the union. California has some of the weakest, basically none. As long as he's not in jail, he could vote in California, but he doesn't live in California. And in Florida, if he's convicted, actually, he will not be able to vote. And if he cannot vote, will he be able to appear on the ballot in Florida?
Hmm. Well, I think that, again, as the way the system is currently structured, that would be for the courts to decide, because the Constitution places limited restrictions or qualifications to become president. He's over 35. He's a natural born American, and it doesn't talk about whether you've been in jail or not. So,
But it says that the states shall be the sole judges of the electors. And so I'm not asking whether he's qualified to be president. I know he's qualified to be president, and we had at least one serious presidential candidate in history. Can you name the one serious presidential candidate who ran not once but twice from jail?
gee, I don't know. Was it that? Was it Harry Stanton? I'm not sure.
Eugene Debs.
Eugene Debs. Yeah, yeah. The comic. Yeah, Eugene Debs. Okay, yeah.
Eugene Debs. He was a socialist. He didn't carry any states, but he was on the ballot pretty much, I believe, in all 48 states at that point.
Uh-huh.
And he was actually in jail, convicted. Our election laws have gotten a little bit more complex since then,
Mm-hmm.
but the prejudice against Trump is so immense. I mean, one of the wild cards that I have a difficult time figuring out right now is DeSantis, and DeSantis recently, or maybe as recently as yesterday, possibly, said that he believed that Trump lost in 2020. What do you think? What do you think DeSantis' role in all this is?
Well, I think he's running for president, and he is this one in second place. And so, if Trump is excluded from the Republican Party for a variety of reasons, then he's the one that's most likely will be the candidate. But I think that Donald Trump's support is so strong, as opposed to all the other candidates, that he will still be the nominee.
Okay, what he could be the nominee even if he's convicted.
Yeah, I think that's
What are as a lawyer, what do you think the consequences of electing a convicted felon as president of the United States would be, aside from the incredible comfort it'll give to all other convicted felons in the United States?
Oh, I think it'll be immaterial. I mean, who could have imagined that Donald Trump would be impeached twice? Or was it even 3 times? I don't know how many it was. But pardon me?
Twice.
Twice, yeah. So, this is just maneuvering by the establishment, by the deep state, as Todd called it. And so I think that his support is so strong among the Republicans that he still will be the nominee and he will be elected president. And I think it will be immaterial that he was convicted by the establishment of any sort of crime. I think that
wasn't quite my question. That wasn't quite my question. Obviously, if somebody has political power, they can become president. But no, my question is the legal system. What's left of the legal system, and how do you perceive, as a lawyer, how do you perceive the legal system, and whether it's capable of surviving this crisis? Because I see this as a major crisis of credibility for the legal system.
Oh, I don't see that at all. I think the legal system is so large and expansive that this is such a unique issue that it will not have a larger impact or any sort of impact on the legal system. It'll only have an impact on the political system, and that will be great.
You're very optimistic. I mean, I guess, as Todd was mentioning, he and I have both been victims of the criminal justice system, the legal system in the United States, and it changed our lives for the worse in some fairly dramatic ways. And I vacillate in my own soul between feeling like, wow, it's really great that they've indicted Trump because it indicts the system. And another thing that I want to do, and even if you chicken out and don't finish the second hour, this time I want you to come back and talk about the grand jury system and the system of indictments. That's something that I want to explore in this new series, and the details of the legal system. How does the system operate? And like the New York case, how do we construct indictments that are so vague that it's basically impossible, even for a couple of fairly well-educated legal minds like you and me, to figure out exactly what the purpose of the New York indictment really is? It's not like indicting somebody for murder or even securities fraud. It's a very abstract set of offenses that are being charged against him. I mean, did you read the Mar-a-Lago, the longest of the indictments? I think it's 45 pages or something. And
was that the confidential documents?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and basically, I mean, I don't know, it's the New York Times or Washington Post, one of the major papers, had a chart of the indictment showing the documents moving around Mar-a-Lago. That's specified as somehow one of the offenses that he's accused of is moving these documents around. And I mean, it's just kind of impossible to figure out what exactly they're saying about these documents. And when Harry Truman, when he went back to Missouri, he talked about taking his own luggage up to the attic, and nobody ever searched to see what papers he had about the atom bomb or anything else.
Yeah. What I think is happening now kind of underscores the changes that we're seeing in the judicial system over a period of time. I mean, for the longest time, the judiciary, both the officers of the court, being the judges and the lawyers, were WASPs, and they had an approach that was waspish, was common law based, and was and maybe some people didn't like it, but there was an underlying justice and sense of fairness that is personified by the lady with the blindfolds holding the scales in her hand and a sword in one hand. And I think that's the way that our system worked magnificently until now. What we've done is, over the years, we have thought that we want to empower various non-white groups and other people and put them in positions first as district attorneys, as public defenders, as judges. And so now we're seeing a breakdown of the WASP system of justice personified by Lady Justice with the scales and the sword. And so we're going to see now that that approach is going to come back to bite us at a lower level, because this indictment is a grand example of abuses that take place when we replace our traditional judicial system with up and coming people who have a different agenda, or have an agenda. But then if you take a look at our predecessors in law, maybe 200 years ago, 300 years ago, you had in England, if you stole a dog, it was a felony, and felons were sentenced to death. So if you stole a dog, you could be put to death. And so that's why they changed some of those things. So there was what we would consider to be an abuse back then on the other direction, and now we're seeing abuse by the new nouveau prosecuting attorneys and judges. And I think it doesn't bode well for fairness, because I believe that when the WASPs controlled the judiciary and the prosecutorial positions, there was the best fairness imaginable. And now we're going to see it to come back to bite many people.
Do you think that we're entering an era where the judicial system is going to be turned largely against WASPs?
Oh yeah, I think we definitely, we see that all the time. The cops are afraid to take action against blacks because they protest. Whites don't protest, and so they can go willy-nilly against white people. And these examples are coming more and more to the forefront. And we're seeing a breakdown of, there is massive theft going on in major cities, shoplifting and sneak thievery going on, and they're doing nothing about it. So that you have the blacks are taking advantage of this because the judicial system does not prosecute them. And so we're seeing anarchy on one level, and we're seeing the prosecutions. The white people that generally are more law-abiding, but that can't be said for sure. And also other races beside the blacks are more law-abiding. They are suffering the brunt of the lawlessness that we're seeing in the large cities. So on every aspect of the law, we're seeing a dramatic change, and it hurts the whites as well as other law-abiding groups.
If Donald Trump were to be elected, do you think that he is wise enough or sophisticated enough to embark on a reform of what you mentioned at the beginning of this session on the plethora of laws that has come down that basically is what has permitted the indictments against him?
A lot of those sophisticated changes will depend upon the people he has in positions of authority that he appoints. They're going to be in charge of making sophisticated, proper changes. Donald Trump himself will go about being vindictive. He's gonna punish the people he wants. He's going to spend his time going after the people that went after him, and that's what we need. I'm going to enjoy that. It's like I was reading an article about how Oberlin College now is suing their insurance brokers because the insurance brokers won't pony up money for this the money that they have to pay out to this Gibson bakery. And so I'm thinking, well, who do I root for? Do I root for the insurance companies who won't pay, or Oberlin College who has to pay it? You know, and both of them are the bad guys. And so what we're going to have now is that we have Donald Trump is going to be vindictive, and I'm going to be rooting for him against his enemies. And he's going to take some things that I think some approaches that are going to go against good, sound, ethical principles. But I think that's what he's going to do. And his cabinet, his kitchen cabinet, they're going to be in charge of making the legitimate non-personal changes to our society. And so it depends on who he appoints. And if he appoints, the what's it called, the Vice President Pences to those positions, we're not going to see the change that we need.
Other than Rand Paul, who do you think should be part of a new Trump administration?
Oh, I don't know. I think there's a lot of people who say who should not be. I don't know. I think that I would like that Senator Kennedy that's got a Southern accent.
He's from Louisiana.
Louisiana. Okay, I think he would be good. I can tell you a lot of people who would not be good. I don't want the turtle from Kentucky. Of course, he's going to die soon. I don't want what's it called, the vulture capitalist from Utah. There's a lot of people that I don't want. But who do I want? I would think. I don't know who else would you want? Pat, give me some names.
I don't have anybody because I don't. I mean, the part of the astonishing thing is it's hard to imagine anybody who really wants to make change, who has any standing at all. I mean, I would love to see you as the Attorney General to succeed Merrick Garland, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I would want to be in charge of the FBI because I shut that thing down in a heartbeat. But I think that in Congress there are a number of good people. I would pick that former congressman who was from Iowa that was kicked out because he was saying a bunch of things that were too moderate relation to white people. What was his name? His name was I can't think of his name. King. Former Congressman King. I would like to have. What about Taylor Greene, whatever her name is?
Marjorie
Taylor Greene. Of course, I think generally, I think we should have men instead of women in there. Women have different purpose in society, but I think she might be good. I would think that there would be maybe I don't know who that person is, but the president of certain institutions that I support, like Hilldale College, that president might be good for something, although I don't know who he is. I think that there are I think, is it Bannon should come back in? I don't know. There's a lot of people that he could pick from, and a lot more people that he shouldn't.
Okay, in the time that we've got left, let's talk a little bit about the grand jury system and indictments. What do you think about the role of prosecutors and grand juries, and what would it take to restore the power of grand juries?
Oh, I read an article recently, and it was a reread from something that I'd heard of 20 years ago, where how the district attorney of Manhattan said that he could get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich if he wanted to.
That's a very old concept, but
yeah. But I think that's basically true. Very few times do grand juries not indict, and I think maybe we should educate them, all juries, about jury nullification, because I think that might be a good thing to counter the leftist approach of the judiciary and the prosecuting attorneys. But I don't know how often are grand juries impaneled for criminal cases. I'm not a criminal lawyer, but are they
in federal court? It's pretty much universal because of the Fifth Amendment. In federal court, it's pretty much universal. In the state of California, they're actually fairly common. in even though there's there are options in the state of Ohio, it's pretty common. But the interesting thing is that there's an article from the Boston University Law Review that I've been reviewing in connection with this, re-examining the grand jury. Is there room for democracy in the criminal justice system? And is that something that we could advocate for and value, that basically restoring the power of the people by reducing the power of prosecutors and judges, that juries really could once again. I mean, what you're talking about, what are you calling it, jury nullification?
Yeah.
It requires a complete change of cultural psyche that would de-emphasize the importance of both lawyers and judges. And what Todd was talking about earlier, of course, was the apathy and ignorance of young people, and their sort of unwillingness to throw themselves into the active business of self-government.
Well, I think the rank and file member of American society are too similar to what Todd talked about as these college students that 90% think that socialism is the way to go. I think that too many of the rank and file jury pool would be more inclined to take positions contrary to what we would like to see taken. And so I don't know that expanding the jury pool would be a good thing, or having more.
Who said anything about expanding the jury pool? I was talking about expanding the power of juries, which might involve actually the same thing as making voting more significant. If we reduce the franchise, if we reduce the pool, then it might make the process more meaningful. I mean, this is one of the paradoxes, I guess, of democracy, as W.S. Gilbert, wrote in one of his operettas in the 19th century. When everybody's somebody, nobody's anybody.
Well, let me just take an example that exists outside of grand juries. There has been movements in many states to have police review boards review the police activities to see whether they should be indicted for police abuse. And of course, the police unions heavily fund against those type of movements because they don't want civilians in there deciding how a policeman should be punished for his actions. And when it goes before a police board review whether this policeman should be punished or not, the policeman is invariably not punished. And if he does get punished, he will appeal it and he will be restored with full back pay. Take, for example, that policeman that in that school shooting in Florida, Brainerd County, Florida, who was cowering behind his patrol car, refused to go in while all of these beautiful young kids were being shot to death. And so they terminated him. Well, he got reinstated with full police back pay. So I don't know. In that situation, if you had a civilian review board comprised of the people I want on there, then if the policeman did something wrong, they'd be punished. And if we had a bureaucratic review board for all of the bureaucrats to do things wrong, if a bureaucrat does something wrong, he gets written up and is put in his file, and that's it. But if you're a private employer and you do something wrong, you get fired. So if we established a bureaucratic review board with the people that I want on there, there'd be a lot more of them be kicked out of. They'd lose their pensions and they would be kicked out on the street.
Okay, civilian review board. How would that differ from the function of an early American grand jury?
Well, I'm not sure about what you mean by an early American grand jury, but it sounds to me more desirable than the current grand jury system we have, although I'm speaking from ignorance.
Well, I mean, for example, the early American grand juries basically were impaneled. They could investigate municipal failure of municipal policies to work. The American Revolution was fueled in large part by grand juries disapproving the acts of the king's representatives in the American colonies.
Of course, were the Salem witch trials, was that pursuant to a grand jury?
No, that definitely was not. That was a different system of oye and termine. Specific charges brought by the equivalent of special prosecutors, special investigation. But no, I mean, each American colony instituted its own version of the grand jury, but outside of criminal prosecutions, colonial era grand juries were used for evaluating tax policy, evaluating the conduct of public officials, supervising public works. Some of the colonies even allowed grand juries to audit public institutions and inspect jails. In other words, you had a general purpose of a grand jury that was way beyond what we're allowing right now. I mean, I think that you know about the case of. Do you know about the case of Terry Trussell in Florida?
I do not.
Yeah, that was another one of my adventures about 6 or 7 years ago. No, more than that. I'm getting so old, it's horrible. But 8 or 10 years ago, actually. But he tried to form a common law grand jury in Florida when he was appointed the foreman of a statutory grand jury, and the state of Florida, much to its discredit, ended up prosecuting him for basically usurpation of power for trying to make a grand jury operate in the way that it originally had. During the in the build up to the revolution, grand juries became a tool for outright resistance to the monarchy. When there was a newspaper publisher named John Peter Zenger, and he was charged with libelous statements against the crown, and a New York grand jury refused to indict him 3 times. And so in the early republic after independence, Americans adhered to the idea that the grand jury would act as a great defender of liberty. That's why it's in the Fifth Amendment. And the right to a grand jury that's why the grand jury is still so commonly used in federal prosecutions and all over the states. And strange to say, it was after the Civil War and other suppressions of constitutional rights, among the many suppressions of constitutional rights that became popular after the Civil War, they started cutting back under the 14th Amendment. The Supreme Court, for whatever reason, decided that they would not incorporate grand jury requirements into the rights of the people under the 14th Amendment.
Well, I think what you're saying sounds good, but you have to realize that we were dealing with a different population back then.
You were dealing with the WASP culture that you're talking about.
Yeah. And so I think now if a grand jury is made up of today's denizens, it would not achieve the purpose that I would like to see achieved. And that's why that would be maybe a Band-Aid on a system that just doesn't work. So that's why it all goes down to you need a white ethno-state for this to work. A grand jury made up of of various races of people. There, a lot of women that with dyed blue hair and tattoos and nose rings and transsexuals and all that kind of stuff. They're not going to do anything better than the system that we have now. So I mean, in concept, it's good, but in practical enforcement, is not going to work.
You say you're going to live in California for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I like it.
How would you ever restore California to whiteness?
Well, I think we need to wake up the white population to realize that they have a right and an obligation to have a society of their own. I mean, I'm recalling the Oregon student body a few years ago, and some Democratic candidate says that soon America is going to be majority non-white, and the whole white audience clapped and applauded and hurrayed for that. And then you have various leaders saying, "Oh, I can't wait till my white pasty men are no longer in control." We have to change the attitude. We have to, again, be proud of who we are, decide that we're going to rear our children to be good citizens of the community, and then and realize that interracial marriage is wrong, or at least white, what is it called? Interracial, or between white and other people. I can't tell other races what to do, but our white people need to only marry white people and have good children, rear them to be good citizens of the community, then eventually wake up and reclaim a little bit of land for ourselves, have just only our people living there, and then expand it so that we can grow and build again. Right now, we're just declining at an unprecedented pace, and it needs to stop, and then we have to have the remnant to rebuild. And it may take a couple of generations, but it can be done.
California is not quite. I'm looking at the picture on your wall behind you. California isn't quite where the land of the Eiffel Tower is, but it seems like you're going there pretty fast. And I mean, if France, I mean, how would you? I mean, realistically, how can you manage to instill any pride in people? I mean, in the people of France or the people of California, they've surrendered so much.
Well, when I was born into a country that was predominantly white, and at the time I was a child, all of Europe was more white than America was, and so in my lifetime, every white country has seen dramatic demographic shifts, and I'm optimistic. I think it can be reversed. First of all, we have to no longer be afraid to be called racist. The word racism is the one single word that has caused the destruction of every white society. And that doesn't mean that we treat everybody improperly. We need to treat everybody with good principles and not discriminate against anybody. But we cannot be afraid to be called racist if we want our own country and our own society. And if we're opposing to interracial marriage, if people are going to call us racist, then we just have to accept that. And once we begin to instill pride in ourselves again, then it'll be a slow build, but we can do that. It's been in my lifetime, I've seen the disintegration of our society, but I think that maybe in my kids' or my grandkids' lifetime, we can go the other direction.
You still haven't answered my question. How do we turn it around? I mean, I'm just looking at this picture of the Eiffel Tower, and I'm thinking of the thousands of churches that have been burned or bombed in France. And your wish has been granted. We're running out of time.
See you next week.
Definitely. This is a brand new start. new beginnings. Today is the day of the lion's gate. I started today because astrologers say that this is the luckiest day for new beginnings in the entire year.
All right. Let me know when you want me on again, and I'll
Good night, everybody. Thank you very much.